Hey guys, Metal Jesus here. Now, as you might expect, a lot of people do ask me what I recommend people use when they want to connect, say, an older console to, say, a newer television. There are lots of options out there. And occasionally, I have recommended the mClassic. In certain scenarios, this is actually a pretty interesting device, and I've done a couple videos on it in the past. And then recently, they announced 2 new additions to their lineup, and a lot of people, myself included, were kind of baffled by this and confused because we're not entirely sure why they made these and what they do. Well, they've sent me 2 of these for review, and I've spent the better part of a week messing around with these, and I would say I am still confused. I'm still not entirely sure what they're thinking with these products, and I don't know if I would recommend them or not. Let me explain. I do want to take a second and talk about what the original mClassic does. I've had this one here for several years, and it is a really interesting device. Basically, it is a plug-and-play graphics processor. And you can see it's very small and simple in design. So it has a source there, so you plug it into an HDMI source, and then it outputs the HDMI to your television, and it gets power right there from a mini USB. And then on the side of it has 3 switches for 3 different modes. The first one being pass-through, so it basically just sends the signals directly to your TV. It doesn't do any processing. And the second mode is for the Switch, and then the third is for retro games. And this is the product that they've had for several years now, and like I said, I've had it in my game room, and it's pretty interesting. Like, it does some really cool stuff with the original Dreamcast and also the original GameCube. It's nice because it keeps the aspect ratio in that retro mode at 4:3, so the games look really great. They're not artificially stretched. And what it's primarily doing there is it is upscaling it to 1440p, so it doesn't go to 4K. That's very important to know. Even the newer ones don't go to 4K. Again, it's just 1440p. And it adds anti-aliasing plus some other processing to the image. So basically smooths out some of those jagged edges that you might see, and it will typically clear up some of, I guess, the signal. I'm going to show some of that working as we go along here. And for the most part, I think they've had some happy customers with this original version of it. You know, if you're looking for just a little bit better graphic processing added onto whatever you already have, it seems to do okay. But then they introduced these 2 other devices, and yeah, I was very confused by these, and I was very curious to check them out. They basically broke them out into 2 different versions, one specifically for the Switch and one specifically for retro gaming. And we're going to jump into the Switch one first, this blue one here, because that's the easier one to kind of explain, and then once you understand that, then we're going to jump into the retro one, of which I have many opinions of. On this one, you have 3 modes as well. However, they don't have pass-through. So basically, mode 1 is exactly like the original red version, the original Switch version that came on the Classic. Then you have mode 2, which is Switch Enhanced. And then you have mode 3, which is Switch Enhanced Plus. Let's go ahead and take a look at some footage here. So this here is Cruisin' Blast, a fantastic arcade racing game. And on the left, you have the Switch OG version. That's the version that basically came out on the Classic. And then you have on the right, the Enhanced Plus version. And as you can see, they're very similar. The 2 things that stand out to me on this title screen is look at the white levels there in the center. You notice that one of them is very bright and the other one is not. And then also notice how the reds on the right-hand side are much more saturated versus the ones on the left. What I'm told is that their goal with this was to give people, I guess, more options as to how Switch games were displayed on your television, specifically trying to make it closer to the handheld feel and look of it. So, you know, if you've ever held a Switch OLED, the latest version of the Switch, the darks are very dark and it's very saturated, and so they're giving basically that look to your television through these modes. However, as you see here with the game in motion, honestly, it's incredibly difficult to tell the two apart, don't you think? Yeah, maybe the sky is a little bit more saturated on the right-hand side, but you don't notice it that much when you're playing the games. I mean, you know, I'm playing this right here, and if you didn't have them side by side comparing the two, I don't know if I could even tell. Even side by side, I can't really tell that much. Can you? It's kind of funny because I feel like I'm living in that meme on the internet. You know, the one where the guy goes to the eye doctor and he's like, okay, is number 1 clear or number 2? Number 1 or number 2? And the guy's like, they look the same. I don't know, man. Now let's go ahead and check out something very different. This is Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe. This is a 2D platforming game, so it's a little bit different. And right here, we are looking at direct footage, no mClassic whatsoever. It's direct to my capture card. And then here is a side-by-side with the mClassic in its Enhanced Plus mode on the right. Can you see any difference? Not really, but let's go ahead and try the green switch. So, and you can kind of see that there's a little bit more, I guess, dynamic range there. Maybe it's a little bit darker, but again, it's very subtle. Here you can maybe see a little bit more contrast in that blue pattern on the level right there. Maybe, you know, maybe it's a little bit more contrasty. And then we switch over to the green mode and you can kind of see there's definitely a difference in the blue. But is it enough? I don't know. Looking at these side by side, even on a really nice monitor here in my office, you know, I just don't know if I'm seeing that big of a difference to really get excited about. You know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, what do you think? It's possible that if I forced the switch into 720p, that maybe more processing would happen on the mClassic. But again, I don't know if you would necessarily even need it to begin with, right? You know, you see this footage here. Again, it looks fine. The game looks and plays great. There's no lag or anything. I have no necessarily complaints. I just don't know if it's doing enough, especially over the original. Now let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit and take a look at the mClassic Retro. So this is where they advertise play old games like new. And on the side of the box, they list a bunch of consoles that this thing supports, right? You have the GameCube, the Super Nintendo, the PlayStation, the Sega Genesis, the Sega Dreamcast, etc., etc. However, there's a big caveat here. There's a big asterisk. And it gets back to that original design. The problem is none of those consoles have HDMI out. Right? Natively, they do not output HDMI, and this thing only works with an HDMI source. Well, you look on the back, and you look at the really small print there, it says, requires third-party HDMI adapter. That, to me, is kind of annoying. And here's the thing, the original version of this obviously had a retro mode as well, and, you know, you would have had to use an HDMI adapter with that, but the problem is that they never really advertised it as a retro device, right? It was actually mostly, I think, advertised as a Switch device that just happened to have this retro mode. But here, I could see a customer going, oh yeah, I have one of those consoles. I'd like to be able to play that on a modern television. Well, guess what? This won't work out of the box. Now, maybe that's not a big deal to you. You know, obviously there are a lot of different solutions out there for connecting old consoles to get them to HDMI. For this particular video, I am specifically going to use the RetroTink 2X because I feel like that's the one that has really good quality, but also is relatively affordable as well. And what does it do? Well, this has 3 modes as well, and the first mode is that original retro version that came on the Classic. Then they have mode 2, which they're calling Vintage Retro, which, as far as I can tell, they really are trying to give you that CRT feel. I'm going to show that because I think it misses the mark a little bit. And then the third mode, they're calling Vintage Retro Plus. So let's take a look at the Dreamcast here. Now, again, this is an original Dreamcast. I'm keeping it very simple. I'm just doing composite out to the Retro Tink, and then I have this mClassic Retro plugged into it, and this is the Retro Plus version of that. And so this is upscaling to 1440p, and it's doing anti-aliasing. So all of the different edges are kind of smoothed out, and the colors are very vibrant. But then check this out. This is mode 2, the vintage retro look, and it's really like desaturated. I think it honestly looks terrible. They basically bled a lot of the colors out, and again, this is their version of maybe what we remember a CRT to look like. I don't know, man. My CRT doesn't look like that. My CRT actually, in my game room, looks fantastic. And I think this is kind of a missed opportunity here, because I think most of us, when we think of CRTs, we actually think of scan lines, not desaturation. We think of scan lines. And so it's a bit of a missed opportunity to not have this turn on scan lines. And then here's the other mode that's designed to look like the original retro mode on the mClassic. And then let's check out a couple other games here running on the Dreamcast. And again, switching between the modes, you'll basically increase the saturation and also the contrast. And I don't know, I just feel like they probably should have chose the best one. And again, maybe gave people the option for scan lines or something. I don't know. It just seems unnecessary. But what about modded consoles that have better video output? Well, this is my PlayStation 1. It's been modded to have 1080p output over HDMI. Let's go ahead and plug in the mClassic Retro to it. This is another side-by-side that I've slowed down to make it a little bit easier to see. On the left, we have my PlayStation 1 Direct that is going straight into my video capture card, not using the mClassic on the left. And then on the right, we have the Retro Plus, and it has the blue LED. And you're probably noticing what I am, and that is I don't see any difference whatsoever here. I'm not seeing any, anti-aliasing, any smoothing out on crash there. Also, the 3D letters at the top, there's just nothing going on here. There's no color correction, color changes at all. And so if I was to guess, it's probably that the mClassic just doesn't know what to do with this and just passes it through unchanged. The problem is, though, is that there are a lot of modded consoles out there, and who knows how many of them work or don't work with this device, which is, again, a huge bummer, right? Now let's move on to the GameCube, and this is where the mClassic in the past has really shined because of that anti-aliasing, basically boosting up that 480p signal to 1440p and also adding all that smoothing. And you see that right here. So on the left is, without an mClassic, it's direct just to my capture card. And then on the right, you have all of the different modes. And again, this is really interesting here because I don't see any difference between the different modes. Yes, it looks really good. If you look at the table and you look at his pant legs, now I've slowed this down a little bit to try to make it easier to see. But yeah, there's definitely an improvement in the video quality here, but I don't think there's any difference whatsoever to the actual modes. So I don't know if there's something specific because I'm using an Eon HDMI adapter on the back of my GameCube. I don't know. Again, I don't know if people necessarily even care the fact that there are different modes, but yeah, as you can tell, I'm struggling sometimes to see why you need all these different modes and all these different options. I don't know. I mentioned one of the things that they advertise with this is that it cleans up the video image. And in this footage, you can definitely see that. So this is Burnout 3 running on my PlayStation 2. And look at the sky. So on the left is without the mClassic, and on the right is with the mClassic. And you can definitely see it cleaning up that image a little bit in the sky. Again, does it matter when it's in motion and you're playing this game? Probably not. Like, had I not pointed that out, maybe you wouldn't even noticed it. But, again, it's doing stuff, I guess. Now let's go ahead and check out some Sonic 2 running on the Sega Genesis. And so on the left is Mode 3 Vintage Retro Plus. On the right is Mode 2 Vintage Retro. And you can clearly see there are some big differences in the colors. And I've slowed it down so it's a little bit easier to tell. And, you know, again, you can hear by the tone of my voice, I'm just trying to figure out why. I don't know. I'm not getting it, right? I just don't understand. I don't understand why we need all these different modes with these colors that are either correct or slightly off when it was already decent on the original version of this. Here's probably a better example of all three modes side by side from each other. And you can clearly see that, yes, there are definitely some differences there. Specifically when you look at Earthworm Jim himself, and you'll see that, you know, like especially on the left-hand side there, it's like he's almost kind of like an orangey, maybe yellowish, where in the center he's very pink looking. A little bit later into the demo here, yeah, you see it really well here because you get a little bit of the background at the top there. And again, yeah, you're getting very distinct shades of yellow and red and orange up there. So, I mean, I guess it's cool that they're giving you all these different modes. As to why you would need all three of them, maybe to dial it in to your specific television, I think, maybe. And that's kind of where I am with these devices. I just don't see why we needed these two additional ones when frankly, the original was fine. You know, I think what they should have done is they should have did the true successor to this. They should have done the mClassic 2 with true 4K output because, hey, we've all got 4K televisions now. It's kind of weird that this isn't doing 4K, right? They also could have updated the power so it uses USB-C like pretty much every other brand new device on the planet, right? You know, I don't know why they're not doing USB-C, but whatever. And they could have just combined a lot of this stuff, you know? I guess that's the thing is I see all these different modes added to these almost like, who asked for this? Who needed it? I just don't get it. And I do think that they are a bit misleading on the retro because, again, you have to assume that whoever buys that retro is going to have a solution to get their consoles up to HDMI. That's going to be huge for me because, you know, as I mentioned, a lot of people will ask me for solutions for their older consoles, and this is not going to be one of those things I recommend because, yeah, they've also got to go out and get another adapter for that just to make this work. So, yeah, I don't know. But I'd love to know what you think. You know, obviously with this review, I tried to be as fair and as honest as possible, but as you can see with the frustration in my voice, I'm not sure if I'm getting it, you know. I don't know, man. I guess it's just not for me. You know, again, I would just recommend if people are interested in this type of device, just get the Classic. It does everything you probably want anyways. But anyways, guys, that's my review. I want to thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.